Welcome to Mining Your Stories. I'm your host, Giselle Michel, and Mining Your Stories really is a platform that focuses on aging, purpose, and possibilities. Today, we are going to be focusing on, I think, really an important topic and a sobering topic, and one that I think perhaps partly because we don't really think it's going to affect us, or we don't think of the ways it may intersect with our lives. The topic today is going to be about elder financial fraud. And so, by saying elder, those of you who are in your 50s may think, oh, this doesn't really have anything to do with me. But the reality is it really does. Because you have a loved one, you have a family member, you have friends. An elder is described from the articles that I've read in preparation for this, including the book and the author, who's going to be introduced to you in a moment. Elder is identified primarily as people who are kind of retirement age and older, right? So 60s, let's say 67, 70 and over. However, a lot of articles talk about the fact that people who are 50 and to 59 have also seen an increase in financial losses related to scams, financial scams, to the tune of $2.5 billion, according to the FBI in 2024. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System quotes a number of 28.3 billion. But what we do know is a lot of billions of dollars are being affected through scams targeting people 50 and over, and especially targeting people 67 and over. So this morning, we are going to speak to author Carole Appleton, who also happens to be a friend. I met Carole when we worked together, and she was telling me the story of that was playing out in her family. And she was going to write about that story. And that story proved to be part of her current advocacy these days and how she lives her life. And so we are going to meet her in a minute. Welcome, Carole.
Thank
And
you, ma'am. Nice to see you.
yes. By the way, congratulations on the book. But the book is called Betrayal of Trust. Christopher Delzato, who is a sector chief of the FBI, says every number, we were talking about 27 billion, 16 billion, et cetera. He says every number in the reports that we have read represent a real person and a victim whose trust was betrayed. The name of Carole's book is Betrayal of Trust, whose financial security was compromised and whose voice deserves to be heard. And really, that's exactly what you're doing with this book, Carole. It's exactly what you're doing. A trust was betrayed, and the voice in that story needs to be heard so that we can learn from it. So thank you again for really agreeing to sit down with me and to talk about this further. Can you talk a little bit about how you sort of fell into um, story, right? Like, why did you decide that? I know it's something that happened in your family, but why did you decide to write about it? Why did you decide that this was a story that needed to be heard?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for reading my book. And I think and before I get started on that, is that those numbers that you just mentioned are great, but I can pretty much assume, and probably are pretty spot on the fact that there's such a stigma of humiliation and embarrassment that I would say probably those numbers would probably, if every single person reported, they would probably be tripled, probably, I would think. Um,
Wow.
Yeah, and when we worked together, I saw it with the cases that we were seeing, is that there were a lot of people afraid to even let people know that this has happened to them. Um, so my whole story started back in, well, we found out in about 2014, that my grandmother suddenly, she had been sick in the hospital, and we were wondering why we were never notified. And she's really good about, returning phone calls and that type of thing. And then certain things fell into place. Her friends started calling my father. My father went down and had to do some investigation because more and more friends were saying, I think something's wrong with her. Um, it may be cognitive, but there happens to be this person that she mentions a lot, and suddenly she was not hanging out in her social circles. She needed to have every decision um, decided by her friend or her new friend. And so I felt really guilty about being a nosy granddaughter, because it technically was none of my business. And if I had found, a small amount of money, I would have just closed the book and say, okay, well, this is what happened. And even one penny of money that is taken the way that it was taken from her is a betrayal of trust. And there are several books that are written called Betrayal of Trust, but very few are written on elder financial fraud, more specifically because of the stigma. And I wrote the book, one, for my mental health, because if I actually took this book from my journal that I actually kept track of, um, and I based it on our story, with several elements changed. But a lot of the outlandish stuff you will find in the book actually happened to me. And I seriously thought, for those of a certain generation, they would remember, I thought I was in Candid Camera Show. Or for a
Mm.
younger generation, you thought you were getting punked. Because I literally could like feel and look around and go, okay, where's the camera? This doesn't happen in real life. It doesn't happen. And unfortunately, it did for us. And I don't want to give the whole story away, because, but we didn't find the justice that we felt was necessary. And as far as I was concerned, when I uncovered everything, I was never going to get justice for what they did to her. Um,
Mhm.
so I just kind of felt that if we can prevent one person from going through what we did, and even if they take one nugget of information from the book, then it prevents them from getting frauded. Or if they feel that something in their family isn't right, they can kind of be guided a little bit by the steps that we took in order to bring this to people's attention.
Mhm. So, did you know anything about elder financial fraud before you start?
Well, you always hear the headlines, because a lot of times the headlines are pretty big, because generally you don't get smaller amounts on television.
Mm-hmm.
So I was aware of it, and I had friends in the banking industry that would give us little presentations and that type of thing. But my background actually comes in minor professional hockey and nonprofits. So that was definitely not the topic of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but during this process, I ended up getting a paralegal certificate, and I had just done so much work that it just seemed natural that I should get that type of certification. And it was just really, it was so heartbreaking that I was like, oh my gosh, I said, if this is going to happen to us, now there's basically 9 of us that were in deep with it. But if this was going to happen to us, gosh, I can't imagine what it's going to be like when I get to 65 and older. And she had some very slow cognitive issues, which in general we would have just kind of shooed off as, we don't see her all the time, we're on phone calls. She lives 6 months in the north and 6 months in the south. So she had her life down there, but she also had her life with us up here. And you don't generally, I think back in the day, from a cognitive issue, I know that we would say, as I look back of it now, we had family members who probably had dementia and Alzheimer's, but it wasn't in a time where people knew a lot about it. Um, and medicine can help with that, but also when the medicine wears off, these people that scammed my grandmother, they basically realized her patterns and kind of would, help her to the doctor in the morning. She passed, got a little groggy in the afternoon. Let's go to the bank and take out lots of money that banks apparently didn't seem to think there was any flags involved in this case. So, but I know that there are laws and other processes and procedures now that make it a little less easy for scammers to get away with things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Easy, but not impossible. Yeah. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Federal Deposit Insurance, Corporations, Financial Crime Enforcement Network, Financial Credit Union Administration, Office of Controllers of Currency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At the end, they did a really amazing report. And, one of the takeaways, at least for me and in the report, frankly, is that, the issues of governance and oversight still need to be addressed and strengthened by multiple verticals, right? So that real protection can happen and that people can have recourse, right? So that even if the crime does happen, then there's recourse that can also happen if not for them, then certainly for family members who are left to have to deal with the reality of what happened to their loved ones. I think there may be an expectation that, that we are protected, right? Because of course we have to be protected. There have to be, these systems in place. Yes and no, yes and no, right? So could you tell us a little bit about your grandmother? So we talked about her being independent, but that's from my reading of your book. So can you tell us a little bit about who she was, but then also kind of where she was in her life when some of these things started to play out for her?
I think it's interesting, her background. Both she and my grandfather were teachers, and so there was always conversations about, your teacher's salary isn't necessarily going to get you as far as you could go, but you have really good benefits and a pension that lasts your lifetime, right? And that was something we knew all the time: save and invest, and come along and if you give us money, we'll match the money. It was very really nice situation for somebody who's young and trying to invest. But I think along the way, I knew she had parents who had helped her financially, both her and my grandfather, because of the income that they got off their pensions. So it would afford them to enjoy life, whether it be, traveling with friends and that type of thing. Um, Never in a million years would I have imagined, until I would go through paperwork that had our family's history leading back to when she was a child. There were documents that she had to have had and ended up in different hands, that her father was worth so much money and she was an only child, so gave her that money to save and invest. And she did very well with that for many, many years. But I think at a point when her cognitive issues came into play, she was extremely independent and very casual. Like, for example, in the book, I happen to mention that she was basically a sneaker girl with jean shorts and a members only jacket, occasionally a fleece shirt, that type of thing, or a flannel shirt. And she was casual. She was just a casual woman. And when I made my first visit to her new place down south, there was like 25 pairs of shoes, and there was like 40 pairs of slacks and 50 shirts, and a whole different identity that I saw. But the real kicker was when she actually came up right before she sold her northern house, and she we had jean jackets on together. Okay, that's weird. She had her hair just like she came from the hairdresser, and she was just a really always kept it really short and just combed it, that type of thing. She had her hair perfectly coiffed, and she had lipstick on. And the woman that in my entire life, I had never seen her with lipstick except in her wedding pictures. Like, it was that dramatic to me. And I was like, wait, what is she? And this is in the time where my assumption is that this person who became the person we believe to be the scammer basically had mentally manipulated her to become part of that person, so that there was so much trust and so much reliability on that person that it was easy to access things like computer passwords, credit cards, to go on shopping sprees for them and maybe for her, and travel in all kinds of situations, that it eventually came to the fact where we always knew there was a bill that had to be paid every single year, and then she couldn't pay that bill. And for a woman who saved and invest and always had money in her bank account and always pay off your credit card as soon as you get it, and it was like ingrained in our brains since we were born, or some of us were born. But it was just so out of character, and she seemed to pass assessment tests for any type of cognitive issue until the state actually assessed her and said, "Oh, she's in stage 3." And I was like, "Wait, what? That doesn't happen overnight, I guess." So, and they told me that it wouldn't. The assessment crew had made mention that it doesn't generally happen overnight. So,
Mhm.
it was basically just a gradual manipulation of somebody who had cognitive issues, didn't understand what she would have done in the afternoon versus in the morning when she had a little bit of medicine assistance. So it became a whole dynamic of just manipulation and basically abuse to a different level. Obviously, there are
Mhm.
several levels of abuse, but the mental manipulation, especially with involving a cognitive issue, can be extremely devastating for somebody.
Mhm. So, one question that people are going to ask after reading the book or during the process of the book is, where was the family, right? I'll leave
Yep.
that you explain that story. But yeah, so and by the way, that question presumes a couple of things. That in every story that there's a family, right? That's not the case. Secondly, even if there's a family member, that individual also has, because they're an adult, they also have autonomy, right? So they have to acquiesce in some way, unless it's very, very clear that they're not able to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things there that have to do with policy and state law and all that kind of stuff. However, the question is still going to be asked, where was the family?
The family was actually never out of the picture. There was no large rift or anything like that. My grandfather had passed away about a year before she moved to this specific community. And I think, she had friends. She automatically had friends, like 20 friends that she spent 3 nights out of the week with. And we would call her weekly, bi-weekly, that type of thing. So we were always in the conversations. But if you're not like living or nearby, those types of things, I mean, there people in the north have family that move to the south when they retire. But the family never had a rift. My father had offered several times to, after grandfather's death that, I'll be your POA, I can be your healthcare proxy, that type of thing. And a lot of people in that generation, and I've lived this life, my life has been great, and then you add technology into it. Now, while she could purchase the technology, she was not versed in the technology.
Mm-hmm.
She would take classes, so she definitely would do her research, and she would want to always buy the most up-to-date technology. Problem is, technology will advance sometimes faster than your brain. I mean, even for younger people. I mean, usually if I have some sort of phone or computer issue, I call my nieces and nephews and I say, "Can you fix this, please?" They've grown up on it. So um, that's how that family ended up saying, "Oh, okay. Well, you need help with your computer? Well, I'll need your password." Or, and then all of a sudden things were falling into place and the money was disappearing. And it was, I'll be honest, I went through, I have a 75-page document of my grandmother's financials that happened from probably around 2010 or 2008, maybe, between check registers, financial service documents, that type of thing. It is massive, and it involves a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to add here a definition for people, again, by the Board of Governors that I keep referencing. Um, they describe in their report the elder financial exploitation as the illegal use of older adults' funds or other resources for the benefit of an unauthorized recipient. So it was very clear that that's exactly what the story was about, right? So once you realize that something was amiss in the story of your grandmother, and with these new friends who had been sort of gathering around her, what were some of the biggest obstacles for you as family members with the legal or financial systems that you then had to try to navigate to either stop, disconnect, or deal with the circumstances you were facing?
Well, one of them is that all of the players in my family, with the exception of one, lived up north. And we had to get attorneys that lived in that state. So there are very few and far between that handle two states of justice. So we had to find an attorney. The hardest part was finding an attorney who would actually return my call, because when you leave a message of that kind on a voicemail, just trying to get somebody to answer to you, it was very jarring, very difficult. I had people who tried to help me connect, didn't necessarily work out. But the other thing I would say is patience. They do say the wheels of justice go very slowly, and they were right.
Mhm.
And I had to try and do my best to speed up whatever I could, with documenting, creating an Excel and all that type of stuff at the time. I think the other thing was, it was just pure sadness that she didn't comprehend what had happened. And you work your whole life to have a retirement. That was how it was. She was born in the 20s. Parents went through the Depression, came through the Depression, didn't have a lot, but then as they accumulated out of the Depression, they obviously were able to save and invest. And she worked hard, and she wanted to have friends, and she wanted to have family. And in the end, she had the family, and she had some wonderful friends who we all knew, except for this particular family. And were there steps that we probably did wrong? Were there steps that we missed? Probably. But to
What
find,
were some of those? What do you think some of those were? Again, I want to give people the opportunity to learn from your story, right? So if you had to sort of redo some of the things that you did, what might you do differently, do you think? Or you know, what did you learn?
well, I think a lot of things I learned from my grandmother. Um, One of the things I think that she was an independent, stubborn New England woman, that you, as much as you want to say that you can do it alone, you can't do it alone. I was
Mhm.
blessed with my family who were totally supportive of what we were doing. You cannot do it alone. And if you think that you have everything set up, you should have hard conversations with your loved one. One of the things that my father was trying to, you need a power of attorney. I don't need a power of attorney. I have everything set up. That's what she would tell my dad. I have everything set up, and my financial services guy knows exactly what to do. And yeah, he knew exactly what to do because he was part of the show. It was a very frustrating, um, but a way. The book is really a way to honor my grandmother, because you're right, there is no perfect plan. I can give tips, and I'm happy to give tips, and I will talk to people about the story. But the one thing I want people to take away from the story is the fact that we set it up in 4 parts, and there's a reflection after each part. So you find out this information in this part, and you look at it and you go, okay, so you see what's happened. Have you noticed anything in your family? Or have you kind of brushed off anything that you thought was not of importance? Um, it's to be present in the moment, the opportunities to be with your loved ones as much as possible. And I know this is like, it's certainly not possible for everybody to do that. I personally took a step back and say, okay, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to be present with my family? Do I ask the hard questions? And trust me, my parents have been divorced for many years, but I've had those hard questions with them. Like, my dad was in the middle of retiring, and I said, okay, I don't need to look at them, but I want to know lawyer, accountant, everything. Who's your POA? Who's your healthcare proxy? What do we need to know? I don't need numbers, but you do need to have a conversation. An interesting thing, I went to lunch with a friend recently, and there was a 17-year-old girl as the hostess at the restaurant. But one of the things that she noticed was, on the cover of my book is a check that is burnt down the middle. And that signifies the older or aging generation. Because most people of 50 and below don't even, or even 60 and below, don't even use a check anymore. Um, and she's like, what is that? How does that happen? And I said, well, it's elder fraud. And I explained what it was. And she's like, well, how do I fix that? And I go, well, what is your family dynamic? Well, my parents are divorced, and I'm the only child. And I said, well, she goes, but I'm 17. Does this apply to me? And I said, if you want your parents' wishes to be what they want, they need to legally put them down and have them filed with the state that they are in. Because there are too many things, too many loopholes in the system. As much as you try to close them,
Mhm.
it could be terminology. If your parents had done their will or trust, like, probably a will more likely 30 years ago, there weren't a lot of terminology of power of attorney or healthcare proxy. You need to do a checkup on your wishes. If you have that, you read them every 5 or 10 years or every life change. That's important as well. The other thing is I had a friend who I was able to help. She read this book, and like days later, she noticed she had never looked at her father, even though she had these statements for her father, the bank statements, she hadn't looked at them. It was just, everything's on auto pay. There's no problem. There won't be any additional transactions. Well, she opened it up. There was an additional transaction, and she couldn't figure out what it meant. She went through his mail, found a pink piece of paper, which is obviously, this is a mail scam, is that it was a pink piece of paper that said final notice, call this number with your credit card so we can pay the $189 or something like that, or your home insurance will be terminated.
Believe it or not, I got something like that in the mail as well.
Yeah, and people of certain ages and not thinking about it are going to say, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. Well, obviously we've been trained to like throw it in the trash. But it is daunting because one of the biggest things I would say about the world today is social isolation. And this applies to all age groups. Social isolation will bring people down a path where they're looking for connection, and sometimes the connection is the wrong one. I've even had I've had a friend whose father met a woman, and after his wife had passed, and he had put the house in his son's name, met a woman, married her. She got everything signed over to herself, thinking that he was going to pass first, but unfortunately she passed first. And so all his savings, monies, all that went to her family, and the only thing he had was the house, which is obviously, a big thing, but he worked hard for that money. He worked hard for that pension, and it was all gone with the swift of a pen. I say to my father, we have regrets. We do have regrets. My father, my uncle, we all wish we could have, but it didn't show when we would see her until all of a sudden the pieces of the puzzle came fast and furious, and we went, oh, this is bad. We didn't know how bad it was, but when my father first went down there, he was going to talk to her, have conversations, and he has the bank's fraud division walking in right behind him. And he's like, wait, what? And, she couldn't pay her bills. And when I realized how much she was actually making, because technically that was really none of my business, and I felt that I was betraying her trust. But it comes a point in time where
you felt that you were, I'm sorry, you felt that you were betraying her trust if you prodded too much into her personal space.
Yes, and it's true. I mean, that's another thing. You don't want, your parents live all their life and they bring you up to be good people, and you don't think that horrible things like this would ever happen. But the catch is, with technology the way it is, and the ease of being able to move things around and that type of thing, it is an issue. Hopefully it's not an issue for the people watching, because you'll be like, oh yeah, you know what, I didn't think about that. Or it can
Carole,
be as outlandish.
Carole, unfortunately, it is going to be an issue for somebody who's watching, because you don't get to $27 billion a year without crossing over a pretty wide swath of people, right? In one way, shape, or another. And I think that's why I thought it was so important, to hear the story, because family setups are just so, people don't live next to each other these days, right? Like that's another part of the challenge of these stories sometimes, because grandma, grandpa, whatever lives several thousand miles away, and we connect over the holidays or over, whatever it is. And as you said, when you see people or when you speak to people, you may pick up a little something here and there, unless it's extremely skewed. But sometimes, what I'm encouraging people to do is sometimes you have to be rude.
It is no, and
Risk
it is
being
so true.
rude.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of times where it was one of the funny things that happened. So in her cognitive state that she was, and she hadn't been assessed as officially as cognitive state. She swore at me, and I think it was indicative of the fact is like I was so shocked, and it was just so shocking some of the things that would come out of her mouth. She was, it was why I would call my sisters. I'm like, Grandma just swore at me. She goes, what do you mean? She doesn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know. What's going on? And those are actually slight signs. I just thought it was comical, and I didn't think very much of it. But then I was like, whoa, she's swearing all the time. What's going on? Like, I get it. People pick up languages wherever they go, that type of thing, and they act differently with their friends than they do with their grandkids. But like, whoa, and it's just so heartbreaking. And I think one of the things that I would want people to take away from reading the book is get mad,
Mm.
be mad, and just take it in and go, okay, this could happen. I certainly don't wish this on anyone. However, if it sparks any kind of conversation with your loved one about what their wishes are, if there's things that you want a particular person to have, an heirloom or something like that, have these conversations. Because I had another person, and not to, I'm now a caregiver for my mother. But there are people that obviously have to hire other folks. And a woman had her mother in independent living. And one of the caregivers that had come in to help her out, I believe it was independent living, but one of the caregivers who came in to help her out took jewelry from her. And so in that case, she had put in cameras in her mother's room. And it is like, it's a betrayal of trust. But if you're at a point where cognitive issue is in play, or any type of issue that would make you a little unsafe, to put in a camera like that is basically, she was able to, now she's criminally going after the person who did this. But they were stealing.
Mm-hmm.
That person's whole job was to go in, help the person, and then do what they need to do, and then leave. You don't know when your family and your any loved one, you don't know what happens with any of your loved ones when they are far away. And I get it. We can't be with them all the time. My father's in South Carolina. It bums me out. But you have to have the conversations that, okay, who did you speak to today? And one of the other things I told my dad when he went to South Carolina, I said, you're not giving a dime to a soul. You understand me? And it's not from me. Like, it's not that I'm like, we are not going through this again. And he understood what I was talking about. I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
looking to get inheritance from my father, because but it's a tough, embarrassing conversation that you have to have. And I've had this with my mother when I first came to caregive for her. I mean, she would get scam calls all the time, or scam texts, or DMV texts and stuff. Oh, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. And I know people don't have that luxury. People don't have that luxury. I made that choice when everything went down. But, there are tools these days that can help people, whether it's I noticed new things like AI assistants, that there's services that out there that can make phone calls to your family member on a regular basis. There's things you can get through the TV, and it's all good, but it can also be bad. So you're going to have to play with those types of things that make that person feel comfortable and you at rest and at peace. Um, and
That's
it's,
great.
yeah.
Because I was actually going to ask you, what changes you think could be made to help uh, families navigate the space better. And by the way, I'm going to echo the story that you just shared about the jewelry. I have a dear, dear friend of mine who's 80, who just turned 89. She knows that she has some congenital stuff that over time may require her to have more medical assistance. The place where she moved would be able to bring that into her without having to go to yet another place. She was telling me that she's noticed that her jewelry's been missing. Now, and she said little by little she started to notice that, the pieces were missing, and then there was a box in which she had several different pieces, and she opened the box one day, it was completely empty. And the only person who could have gone in there is the cleaning person.
Yep.
And I'm like, what are you gonna do about it? Right?
Yeah,
And
it's almost like going back to the old way of, renting a security deposit box at the bank. It's safe.
yeah.
I mean, you could keep a safe in your place, but I don't want to put it out there that this happens in independent living and assisted living all the time, because it doesn't. But
Hmm.
it is a problem, because
It is a
you can
problem.
only vet people so far. And, if you have anything that could be of any kind of temptation for your elder, um, you know, those are things that you need to consider. Security deposit box, and you say, you know what, I can bring
Hmm.
you to go see the security deposit box when I come and visit. So you know that they're
Yeah.
there, and that type of thing. And still, you just never know. Um, but it's a catch 22, and it's pretty much one of the things that I think I learned was the fact that, okay, we're going to try this idea. Throw something at the wall and see if it sticks.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
just have to throw things at the wall and kind of see what sticks and what works. Because, with the evolution of technology, the evolution of AI, there's always going to be something new, and it's going to come quicker than we were used to back when we were high school, college,
Hmm.
young, and that type of thing. And who knows what it'll be like when technically we go into the elder generation. I like to just call it aging. I mean, a lot of times we used to call members of the family, who probably had cognitive issues, even though they weren't tagged as cognitive issues at the time, is we called them senile.
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
was just the way it was, and nobody talked about
Right.
anything different.
Yeah.
And while, the government has entities at all different levels, they also have other things going on as well. So it's if you re- and it's good to report, because those numbers are very important. But in many times they say fill out a form on a computer. People of a
Hmm.
certain day and age, some don't even have a computer. I have a friend, late 70s, doesn't have a computer, has a flip phone, never wants anything to do with it. And that's certainly her choice, but it doesn't make it any easier for her regular life to get
Hmm.
care of these days with all the technology. If you read my book, I'm grateful, and I just want you to be mad and just know that you need to think about these things, whether you want to or not.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm. Hmm.
if you want to keep your family safe and have their wishes executed when that time comes, then you need to make sure that things are legal, things are written and notarized and all that type of stuff. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. I'm just somebody who experienced all the craziness what could possibly go wrong.
So what advice would you give to someone who suspects that something is happening to a family member?
Um, it's interesting you say that, because this afternoon I have to go see a friend whose mother is in that situation. Um,
Mm,
I think one of the biggest things is have the conversation.
mm.
Some are actually going to be willing to talk about it because they notice things and they don't know why they notice those things. Um,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me interrupt. When you say have the conversation, f- what do you mean by that? Just to be so that people can be clear in interpreting what you're saying.
Sit them down and say, I have concerns. Are you doing okay? Have you been eating? I have, if they live by themselves, I have great concerns about your safety. I can only come over here so much. We need to have a plan in place. So if, God forbid, you fall, for example, God forbid you fall, what's going to happen? If somebody doesn't have a medical, the medical alert things, I've fallen and I can't get up, at some point, some people, as much as they may try to deny it, they may actually need it, especially if they live alone. Or even if they don't, you have the grandparents or the parents and they live together. And what happens if one's on one floor and one's on the other? And um, they're very, everybody was brought up to be trusting of authorities and that type of thing, which I totally understand. But some people are bad out there and they try to impersonate the authorities. When, for example, Medicare, when somebody gets a call and says, you know, um, I'm from Medicare. Well, no, you're not, because Medicare will never call you. One tip. um, what if your wishes were made a long time ago with a lawyer? That lawyer may not be around anymore. You want to have a copy of those documents, so that maybe you need to do a checkup with a lawyer or an accountant or something, because people seem to think that once your wishes are put in a legal document, that's the end of it. But terminology changes. um, Terminology changes. Lawyers retire, lawyers pass away just like everybody else, and you need to make sure that if you don't have a current one, you at least consult one, because that's important to have an open line of communication. You mentioned earlier, what would be my big thing? I think the biggest thing that could change is there are just so many places you can report. It's a matter of streamlining, and I know that may sound crazy because it's such a big entity, but you could call the national fraud line. In my case, when this happened, and it certainly could be different, but I hope not to call the elder fraud hotline again. I called the elder fraud hotline. They sent me to the state. The state sent me to the sheriffs, and then that's how it went. And the sheriffs would go to the attorneys, and if the county attorney went with it, that's what would happen. It is difficult, obviously, from my perspective, because I was in a whole other state. If you don't live in the same state, you have to realize that whatever is happening has to be handled by that state. So whether it be guardianship, litigation, anything, it all has to be handled by the state that they reside in, what they call their primary residence. And that's hard, because I know when I conferred with people up in the north on whether they could help me and that type of thing, they offered that it would be great if we could, because our laws are a little bit more stricter than they are in different states. Um, but the problem is every state handles it differently. And I was like, oh, how could that be? I mean, I get that there are some idiosyncrasies that each state wants to keep, and I'm like, this could be a big problem for an entire generation. there's just so much technology out there, and people have ways to, there are a lot of bad people out there. And you're not going to be able to control their actions, but you can control yours, and you can control your loved ones' actions to make sure that their wishes are done the way they want them done. And you don't, and you have to get nosy, but there's that line that you don't have to cross. Like, I went through all of my grandmother's folders and paperwork and everything. I didn't really look at the numbers as like, oh, wow, look at all that money, look at all that money. We never had it. We're not going to get it. So we just move on. And you have to, it take a long time to come to peace with that, because it is such a big number.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it's $1, if it's 10, and if you have to, when they pass, if nothing is in place, it goes in the court system, and who knows what happens after that. But like I said, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, but that was what my experience was when it happened.
Mm-hmm. You sort of hinted at it a few minutes ago, but was there an emotional toll to writing the book for you?
Yep. I think I've written it probably about 15 times, edited it about 15 times, and changed titles many times over. I first wrote the book with the real names in it, but I knew I couldn't do that. I mean, it's funny, some of my friends know who they are right away, but even my family was confused when I wrote the book, and they read it too many times. They're like, do we have to read this again? I'm like, just read it. No, I don't want to. I've already read it a bunch. Um, I even now, as I'm talking about the book and talking about things that happen in the book, I get a knot in my stomach that never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it will in like 4 or 5 days, but like
Mm-hmm.
I will replay that in my head again and again and again. And I made mention in the book, I'm like, I'm not quoting the book, but unfortunately, I am connected with these evil human beings for the rest of my life. But in the positive side of it, I found my mission, and people are reacting to the mission with awe and wonder and being alerted, and they're ticked off. And if I get that reaction, and I know I've already helped a couple of people, because my friend who found out that her father had given his credit card number over the phone, she hopped in her car, went down to the bank, and killed the debit card right away, because she looked at it. She goes, "Oh my gosh, they took $189 out, and they're going to take it every month, aren't they?" And I'm like, they certainly could. So, it doesn't hurt to cancel a debit card and figure out some other different way. I know that when we were seeing these big bills for my grandmother, I remember she had one credit card that was like one credit card bill, which was $30,000. First of all, she'd never pay, like, she'd never even have a bill of $30,000 on her credit card. And so it got to the point where we took her credit card. So there are little things that people can do to keep their loved ones safe. I'm not saying that it's the right thing. I did a lot of things I regret, and I did a lot of things that I said to my grandmother. But in the end, I knew that she knew what I was doing was just trying to give honor to her. And I discussed it with my family, and I'm like, people are going to know that this is our, some people are going to know that this is our story. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and yeah, could we have done more? You can always do more. And now my whole mission is to just speak to people about the whole thing, and everybody's going to have their opinions on it. I get it. But like I said, if I can just change one life, I'd be happy for that.
Mm-hmm. If you could have if you had a vision for protecting vulnerable family members from scams, financial scams in particular, what might that be? Or
It's just being aware.
It's just being aware.
Honestly,
Mhm.
it's very difficult, as we know, as we age. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to age as an older American. How much they have seen. You know, they've gone through major wars. They've lived a lot of life, and as a family member, I always felt it was the responsibility of us to keep in touch with them, make them aware of our lives, what we're doing, and just be involved and continue to make not only yourself aware of things that could happen, but have them be aware and know that you've got their back. So like if they don't use a computer, you can handle, let me take this on and and handle that for you. And in a lot of cases, people I know that their husband passes away, late 80s or that type of thing, their husband passes away and they never drove a car. But like social isolation is it's a big thing, and it's a very big problem with seniors. Because as you lose the love of your life, where do you go from there? But people around you, your family and that type of thing, everyone in my family had to step up and take a role. And we did it without reservation. And some were major roles. Some of us took on major roles. Some of us took on minor roles. But everybody has to work together as a team to make sure that that person is safe. And you will get pushback, trust me.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
a matter
I've been there.
Yeah. It is the way it is. Yeah.
So what's next for you?
I do know that I think I've kind of hit a stride as far as talking to people, whether it be book signings or events signings, that type of thing, and kind of just be putting things out that will make people stop and just take a minute and go, oh, you know, like warnings to adult children. Your parents aren't telling you who they're talking to, that type of thing. And it's difficult. I remember when we did work in the Medicare fraud, one of the things, people would absolutely panic and cry all weekend and just be so disappointed in themselves. And I used to say, have your moment, get your emotions. Giving your Medicare number out is not a good thing, but it's not as bad as giving out your Social Security number. We can fix the Medicare thing. And I think whatever happens in your loved one's life, that they may have made a phone call, they gave their credit card number out, those things can get changed. And you just get a new number. I mean, people remember their Social Security numbers, and some people memorize their Medicare numbers and that type of thing. This day and age, the one thing you need to keep sacred is the Social Security number. And if somebody does give their Social Security number out, you need to act fast. But everything else can be taken care of. I can't say you're going to get your money back, but I can certainly say that you can stop whatever's happening.
Yeah, I think you did a tremendous job with the message in this book. I think, as people who are in their 50s and 60s and over, I think that we think about it as somebody else's story. We don't think about it that it may happen to us in our family or to us individually down the road, right? And as I said before, um, people from 50 to 59 are an increasing number of folks who are being affected by scams and fraud, right? So, and and when I say scam, the intention of scam, every scam, is to eventually affect your financial life, right? Your financial assets. That is it. That is what a scam at the end of the day is about, whether it's a romantic scam, whether it's a mailing scam, a telephone scam, whatever the scam is. The end result is somebody who you don't know, who has no authority or right or association with you, is trying to get access to your money that you worked hard to get, to save and to get. We all have, have had caretakers, aunts, uncles, whomever, who are elderly, aging, and we have to look out for them, and we have to look out for ourselves as well. Because this is not the story that says it can only happen to you over there. It's a story that says it can also happen to me. So thank you, Carole, for sharing and really being generous of your time. And so people can get your book through Amazon. It's a really important story to share. So people can buy the book wherever books are sold.
So, but it's
Okay,
available. It's available in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Carole.
Oh,
And
thank you for the opportunity. This is awesome.
absolutely. And please, everyone, this is YouTube, so you know the spiel. Please subscribe, like, and share the video. It's an important message to share, and we're trying to grow our community. So I will talk to you the next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.